start your own practice, I want to welcome Jean Howe, Allison Brace, and Emma Wilson. And I'll have them all talk about their business and a little bit about their practice first, and then we'll start through some questions. So thank you, ladies, for joining us.
Thank you.
I'll go.
Sure. My name is Emma Wilson, and I do workers' compensation defense work. It's very specialized. That's all we do. And I work at a 3-woman law firm, including myself. We have 2 legal assistants and a runner. So it's small. We don't have an extra office. We don't have room to grow very much right now. That's what I do.
Well, Emma says she's small, but I'm me. So my name is Allison Brace, and I run Non-Confrontational Legal Solutions. I'm a sole practitioner. I do a little bit of everything. I do what's called pro se coaching or low bono work on family law cases. So basically, I try to help people who are doing the do-it-yourself forms as opposed to going forward and doing litigation. And then in the more traditional sense, flat fee, I do some bankruptcies, and I also do some wills and estates and some probates.
I have my own office. I'm a solo practitioner, so I've opened my own LLC. I started it back in October of 2014, so every day is still a learning experience. So I feel very honored that we're asked me to do this, because I feel like I hear a lot of really good experiences from some other people, and also just the challenges of having more recently opened an office. So I focus primarily on criminal law because I just love criminal law, but also love to pick up other stuff too, to learn about different parts of the law. And that's kind of the beauty of having your own office. You can do that.
So I think the first question I wanted to ask is, when did each of you realize that running your own legal business was an attainable goal? And I ask this because I know for myself and other female lawyers that sometimes it seems like something other people do. And yet here you ladies are all having done that. So when did you realize that that was something that you two could achieve?
Well, I'll go first. I'm kind of a big believer in the silver lining in life. And for me, I was fortunate enough to work in the Canyon County Public Defender's Office, and I had a really great boss over there. And when I went over to that office, I realized how much I really liked practicing the criminal defense side of things, and that I thought at some point down the road that I would like to move into the private sector doing that. And so I was fortunate enough to have a boss that would be encouraging as to how to kind of manage yourself even while you were working for them, and trusted you a lot and let you grow. And so probably about August or September of 2013, I realized that that'd be a path I'd eventually like to go down. In October of this last year, that contract ended, and I decided instead of going to the public defender's office at that point, I wanted to open my own shop. And what I thought would make it more attainable was taking some cases with me when I would leave. And so that was what told me I'm good to go. That didn't work out, unfortunately. And so all of a sudden it was starting from scratch. But I'm glad it happened that way, because if I wouldn't have had that little extra push, I might not have stepped out and done it. And that's the best decision I could have made. So sometimes, you've got to talk yourself into it. Sometimes things happen and they fall out from under you, but you just always got to believe you can do it. And sometimes it's stressful, but silver lining for sure.
And I would agree with Jean. Sometimes you need that extra little push to think. I talk to other people who run their own businesses, and they say, it was always my dream. It was always something I wanted to do. And for me, it never was. In fact, in law school and throughout my law career, I always thought, gosh, I really admire those people who do that, but I don't ever want to do that. I don't want to do that in a million years. I can't fathom myself doing that. And then, throughout my career, I found kind of a niche. I found something that I really wanted to do, and a type of law that I really wanted to practice that nobody else kind of did. I worked at legal aid, and I realized there was a really big gap between the people who qualify for legal aid and then people who really need services but don't have the retainer fee. And about that time, the Supreme Court do-it-yourself forms were really coming into play, and people were really using them. And a lot of people were coming to me and saying, look, I just need somebody to sit down with me and go over the paperwork. So I kind of found my niche. I kind of backed my way into it to say, this is the type of law that I wanted to do. I couldn't find anybody else that was really doing that type of law. And coincidentally, right around that time, I lost my job. So it was like, oh, okay, well, I guess I'll do this as kind of an interim thing. It was never my long-term plan to do. And as I got into it and started doing it, I really enjoyed it and really started enjoying the challenges of it. But like I said, I kind of backed my way into it. I was never one of those people that always thought I would do that. So I guess I realized it was attainable when I went out and did it, and it worked. It was like, oh, yes, thank God.
In my situation, my two colleagues and I, we worked together at a different firm, and a really small firm where there was just one other person. He owned the firm. And when we realized that our long-term goals were different than his, then we started talking about, okay, what do we need to do to make this work? And we're lucky in that our clients are essentially insurance companies, and they're called third-party administrators. They handle workers' comp claims. So it's kind of a dialed-in clientele. There's a handful of them in the area who we deal with, and we dealt with them at the old firm, and it was really just a matter of talking amongst ourselves, not with them, because that would violate a number of ethical issues and things. But we talked amongst ourselves about who, if we were to do this, who do we think would go with us? I had in my head that it would cost a whole bunch of money to start your own firm. And once we crunched the numbers, we thought, oh, well, maybe it won't be that bad. And I think it kind of hit us when we went to the bank, because we thought we would have to get a loan. And when we were talking with the bank people, we realized, I don't think we need a loan. I think we just need to chip in, each chip in a certain amount. I think we can make this happen. And then it became like, oh, wow, this is really going to happen. And then it just became a matter of, getting a timeline in place and getting the foundation there, which can take a while. But it wasn't as difficult as we thought at all.
I think that that leads to our next question nicely. When you were establishing startup costs and ongoing expenses and running those numbers, what surprised you, or what was the way you expected versus what surprised you? Kind of like what you were saying, it wasn't as much as you thought it was going to be.
I think you have to be really candid when you're starting with other people about, how are we going to pay ourselves? How are we going to bill? And for us, the rate we charged was kind of built in as well. It's an industry set amount. We couldn't come in charging a whole bunch more than everybody else. And we didn't really want to come in charging a lot less either, because we didn't want to undercut ourselves. And so I think we had to really talk about what can we live with, when times are really, really lean, what's the bare minimum? And you don't want to commit to hiring employees that you won't be able to pay during those lean times. So you have to think about what's the bare minimum that we can get by. Do we need a legal assistant starting out? Do we need a nice copier, scanner starting out, building expenses, all that sort of thing. I think what surprised us was that staff, getting a legal assistant wasn't as expensive as we thought. Insurance is really expensive. And, like malpractice insurance is expensive, but then we have insurance on our building. And it just seems like there's so many little costs for everything, that luckily we were able to afford it. But all these little things come up that we have a standalone office. So are we going to shovel our snow in the winter? Are we going to hire someone to do it? There's little costs with everything. And, I think you just start out as lean as you can and then build from there. So you start out with the bare minimum. I mean, we had to have a talk about, do we need a PO box? Everybody has a PO box. Every office has a PO box. Well, why do we need one? We have an office. We don't need someone to run down every day to pick up the mail. So we don't think people are going to come attack us. We don't need to hide our address or, why, what's the reason for a PO box? So we didn't get one. It's a cost we don't need. So kind of rethinking things too, things you think you absolutely need, you might not.
And yeah, I will agree with what Emma said. You sit down early on, and it was much easier with me because it was just me. And so it was very easy for me to decide, okay, what's my bare minimum and what can I live with and what do I really need? And I decided to do it without the assistance just because the idea of having somebody that I was responsible for really stressed me out. Like, okay, if I eat, beans and rice for a month, that's okay. But if my assistant has to eat beans and rice because I can't pay her, then that's unacceptable. So I had to do that same assessment, what works for me. And the other thing I would say is there are a lot of different options. Each one of us has done it slightly different. Each one of us went slightly different ways. Some, had a standalone. I office shared for for a couple of years, which was a really great arrangement for me. Kind of allowed me to have that company and that mentoring and somebody that assisted me in answering my phones without a whole lot of overhead. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. I know people who use Google phones because they're free and they'll route to whatever cell phone you have. So, I think that there's a lot of different ways of doing it, but be really candid with yourself when you start up. I did bring the book. It's kind of I've had several other people who have read it, and I sort of read it. It's called How to Start and Build a Law Practice, Jay Funenberg. And I will admit, when I first read it, it kind of scared me because it said, of course, he talks about the ideal way to start up a law practice. And he said you should have a year's worth of expenses up front. And I thought, I don't know that I have 6 months, much less a year. So it was a really great ideal. I don't know that I always met it. But, and he talks about all sorts of other things. I mean, from what kind of office furniture should you have? Should you have, the marble mahogany conference room, or should you, just do the tables? So it was a great way of seeing how other people did it. But I would agree with Emma. It wasn't as cost prohibitive or as scary as I thought it was going to be.
I'd say the first thing I did, even before leaving the public defender's office at the end of September, was I figured out my personal expenses, and then I figured out what my business expenses would be to see what my just total overall, what I needed to be able to make per month in order to cover my business expenses and then my personal expenses. And I think that's really important to do because that helps determine how you'll pay yourself and some things like that that you had mentioned, Emma had mentioned. One of the things I spent a great deal of time doing before I went out on my own was going to lunch with people and picking their brains. And I went to lunch with a lot of female attorneys. I went to lunch with a lot of male attorneys that did a broad spectrum of legal practice, whether they were on their own, whether they office shared, or whether they were part of a larger firm. People that had never been a prosecutor and never been a public defender just went straight into maybe a firm, or people that, were hired right out of law school or things like that. I just got the wide spectrum of everybody's information and tried to put it all into one segment, and then I did what would work for me. I think the biggest thing that was overwhelming was the little expenses, just like you said, the little things that you find along the way. One thing I found that really helped me was, and if you do open your own office, see if you can talk to an attorney that's already practicing and see if, for instance, I set up a contract so I could take on conflict cases from counties. One of the things is they're going to require you to do a lot of things. So you have to meet a lot of different standards. You have to have your malpractice insurance, you have to have your liability insurance, you have to have workers' comp if you have employees, you have to have your self-insured, you have to have your car insured, all these things that you're already doing. And so I would talk to an attorney who's maybe done some sort of work like that, because that helps get your structure right into place. Checklist, real easy that way. The thing I found to be the most surprising, not necessarily surprising, but really the thing that's the biggest burden, I would say, is your personal health insurance. To me, I just think it's really important to have that. I think a lot of people, I've talked to different people throughout the profession, some don't have it, and it just concerns me. I think it's one of the biggest things you should have, and it's one of your biggest expenses, I believe. So that's one thing I think you would focus on. That the surprising part. But the thing that we're really lucky about at this time is the technology is so useful, and that our clientele, I would say a lot of our clientele, are okay with meeting in different places and happy that you keep your overhead down because you pass that along to them, and they're happy that you rely on technology. And even with like some of my younger clients, that's all they expect. I mean, they expect to communicate with you through, your Facebook messaging or, emails or whatnot. And it helps reduce your overhead. And so the three best pieces of advice that I got was from one person who's a judge now who told me, get good technology and a good accountant. And then from somebody I talked to that never actually opened their own office, I thought the best piece of advice was keep your overhead low. And so what I've done is I got into an office with one of my old bosses who's giving me a really good deal with my rent, knows that I'm just starting out. So if you can find somebody that you can mentor with that can kind of help you with that kind of stuff, that's a huge help. So look for who you might office share with. That might be somebody that's dependable or reliable or helpful. And I found that that's helped me a lot, keeping that building overhead down and things like that.
And touching on the health insurance issue, like I'm in a different place than my two coworkers. They're married, they each have a kid, I'm single. They have health insurance through their spouses. I don't have it. And when we want it to be fair, but what's fair might not necessarily be equal. And so I had to tell them, look, I really want health insurance. And that's something that I think is important for the firm. So I think that should be just a firm expense that we pay. And when we were trying to be equal, it was like, well, two of us live really close and one of us lives far away and she pays more in gas to drive to the office. And I mean, you can break everything down and it's not all going to necessarily be equal. It'll be fair. I mean, you have to talk about all that stuff. Like, what are your needs? What are their needs? My needs to survive were probably a little bit slimmer than theirs because I don't have a child to support. And so does that mean I get paid less? So you have to have that discussion with people ahead of time. And thankfully, the people I work with are extremely fair and reasonable. I'm extremely cheap. So if it was up to me, I might, if someone said, hey, I want the firm to pay for my health insurance, I might have said, I don't know about that. But being able to have a dialogue with people and seeing how reasonable and how willing to compromise they are, like I'm much more willing to compromise on things now because they were willing to do it for me, which was really important.
Well, and I think she touched on something that was really important as well. I know a lot of people who go out on their own try to find some situation like that where they office share. Very rarely do they start, completely on their own. And, I kind of started from scratch. I moved over here from Idaho Falls. I didn't really have the networking. And so I kind of did it the hard way in a way. I didn't really have that network set up. But I think that's a very important concept to say, okay, can you bring business with you if you already have a business? Can you have clientele, talk to other attorneys and try to, bump yourself up, work office share with people who are going to share work with you and expenses with you, those kinds of things. If you can find that situation, that's really, really helpful also.
And I would just encourage anyone, once you realize that it's something that is feasible, that you want to do, make an exit plan at the same time that you're putting your business plan together, because not a lot of people do that. And we are still working on our exit plan if that day happens, but people don't think about, I like to plan for the worst. Because then I'm always surprised when things don't turn out that way. But it's, when you're going in with other people, what happens if one of them has a major illness or something happens, they're not going to be there. That's going to completely change the game. And so you need to talk about it. Well, is their spouse, are they going to get part of the business? And how does all this work and how are we going to exit? How is it going to dissolve itself, I guess, or what? And so I don't know, as a solo practitioner, what happens if you have an illness and you can't take care of your clients? Like, you kind of have to have that backup plan.
Mm-hmm. You do. You really need to have a contingency plan. And I think, in fact, the Idaho State Bar requires that sole practitioners have a written plan for what happens if I get hit by a bus so that my clients aren't left hanging. Who's going to answer the phone? Who's going to follow up? Who's going to take the cases if I cannot? So it's definitely something that you need to think about and have a plan for.
Yeah. And I do think the exit strategy for your practice is good, and also the exit strategy moving into your practice, your private practice or whatnot, is good too, that you mentioned that. There's a lot of deadlines for applying for things that you might want to do. Like for me, like I said, I like to pick up some conflict work. I wanted to be on the CJA panel and pick up federal cases. Knowing those deadlines too is important for you when you're leaving your job that you're at now, moving into the next thing, because you could miss really important deadlines that could affect the way your business goes for the next 12 months. So.
The next question on my list is about clients and where do you find them and how do you attract their attention, i.e. advertising, yes or no?
I'm not a big fan in advertising at this point. So I do mostly, like I said, criminal law. A couple different ways that works for me is friends. Friends give you so many clients, or are your clients, and, some of them, and it's great. Except then you know all your friends' business more than you wanted to know, and you just gotta pretend like you don't know it. Friends do that. Being in court is one thing for me as a criminal defense attorney. Just being seen in court. I went to court one day here in Ada, and I talked to people, and I had 2 cases by the time I left, not just from another attorney who was just like, oh, I don't have enough time for this. Can you do this? Can you handle this? And if I wouldn't have been there, that would have never happened. So it's keeping yourself active in your organizations, or being in court if you're in criminal defense type stuff. Old clients, when I was in the PD's office, I'll run into them in random places, and they always want a card, and they want to call and talk about stuff. Conflict cases, like I mentioned earlier, Canyon County, I'll do some conflict work for them, or other counties nearby. That helps. And then just letting people know what you do. That's the biggest thing. And you just meet people, and they're interested strangely in what you do all the time, and sometimes you pick up clients that way.
I would agree. I'm not a big fan of advertising. I have ads in the phone books, just because I think it's important to be able to be found. But what I find is that most people already know, and they're trying to find me in the phone book, not that they call me randomly out of the phone book, which makes perfect sense. I mean, if I want to go to a doctor or a dentist or a mechanic, I don't randomly go through the phone book and look. I ask somebody, so who's your mechanic? Who do you like? So word of mouth and networking is also very important. In the meantime, when I was starting up and I didn't have that, I think it takes a while to build into that. I did several things. I found several agencies where I volunteered my time. I didn't have enough to do, so I had time. I did the lawyer referral service through the state bar. So you agree to give a half an hour consultation for the $35. I found that to be really helpful. There's a couple of like legal access plans through companies where people pay out of their paycheck to be part of the legal access plan, and then they contract with other attorneys to give services for those kinds of things. So I got on several of those lists. And I found various other things that I like to do that would kind of supplement here and there. So I'm on the guardian ad litem list for Ada County, which is just kind of a, first come, first serve type agreement. I do some mediation. So just kind of keeping yourself open to different options and building up the word of mouth, I would say, is important.
And our situation was unique because we already had worked with our client base and different TPAs, so everybody knew who we were. We just didn't know who would want to use our business later, but we had built some good relationships with people. And when the time came when we made our announcement that we were leaving, we had people approach us, and we did have some current cases, and they had the option of transferring those cases to us, which some people did, some people didn't. It wasn't anything we took personally, but eventually we started getting more and more and more business. We have a lot of business right now, and that was something when we talked together about going out on our own. It was who are our clients, what is there a need for us if we started our own business? I mean, there was definitely enough work to go around for everybody. And because of the industry we work in, there's going to be a transition. There's a lot of people who are on the brink of retiring or probably should retire. And we saw that. We were like, let's do this. This is definitely an opportunity right now. We don't want to wait until it's too late or, let's just do this now. And then we really we don't do any advertising or anything. I mean, people know us. When we started, we did create a website. We got a Facebook account. I think we have a Twitter account. We obviously don't really use it, but we wanted to get everything in place because I think it, if you have the Facebook account and a Twitter account, it can help when someone does search for you, your website will come up sooner. We really like our website, but I think we don't really get much business. It's word of mouth. It's how we get it.
I think we've kind of covered this question about selecting the business structure or model, but to the extent that we haven't, any thoughts on how to approach that question?
Well, I think one of the first things you need to do is determine how you're going to handle your money, what type of program you're going to use to manage your money. And like I said earlier, getting a good accountant, I think is important. It's a little bit of a peace of mind thing. You're going to pay for it a little bit, but it's, again, peace of mind, and you're going to be complying with what you need to be doing. I think you need to plan on, making sure that, number one, you have to have your trust account set up, and number two, you have your business account set up, and then I would have a savings account set up as well, because you want to put away, I would say, 30% of your income, because you're going to have to pay taxes. And then I try to put away at least 10% of every amount of money that comes in for my business expenses, or to cover membership fees or my malpractice insurance. So I always figure right around 40% of any money that's coming in. I'm not going to even pretend like I made it, just so I don't touch it. So that's the first thing I would do, is figure out your structure for how you're handling your money, and then the rest will fall into place.
And I would agree. I got that advice really early on. Put 30% of whatever comes in. Just if you receive money in, 30% of it automatically goes back out, because you are going to have to pay taxes. And we were talking about those kind of surprise incidentals. First year taxes really caught me off guard, I'll be honest.
Yeah.
So it was nice to have that. Yeah, it was nice to have that money there. So definitely one of the best pieces of advice I got. One of the other best, really good advice that I got from somebody who isn't even an attorney, he said, do what you're good at and focus on what you're good at. And if you're not good at it, don't try to learn it, hire somebody to do it. And I pulled up QuickBooks and I thought, I'm smart, I can do this, I can figure this out. And I spent 2 hours staring at QuickBooks and I thought, I'm not gonna figure this out, I'm gonna go hire an accountant. This is not what I am good at, and I don't wanna spend my time doing this. So hire it out. And when I kind of looked at my structure, I did that first. I consulted an attorney. I was very honest. I said, here's what I want to do. Here's how I want to do it. Here are my limitations. And he said, go set yourself up as a sole practitioner, LLC, and do this. Okay, that's what I did. So as far as a bigger general structure model, I that's how I approached that one.
We're a partnership, and when we first started, we thought we needed some fancy partnership agreement. We went and spoke with an attorney, and then I just did some research on my own and thought we don't need to pay a whole bunch of money to have some fancy contract. There's plenty of templates, forms, books out there. I mean, there's a lot of information available. There's a lot of resources out there. So we had a partnership agreement, but the taxes, we have a bookkeeper and a good accountant, and that's huge. We just recently changed. We formed these S corporations for tax reasons. I don't even understand it. I'm told I will eventually understand it, but you have to kind of rely on other people to give you some guidance. And the tax issue was a huge hit our first year, because our accountant thought we would be making a certain amount of money, and we ended up just going above that. So we were paying our quarterlies based on this lower amount, and then at the end of the year, and we didn't have the best communication with him. And then at the end of the year, it was like, okay, you have a few weeks to come up with a whole bunch of money. And we were all like, what? Like, why? I actually got a loan to pay my taxes? This is crazy. And so obviously, this year we're planning and we're paying more in our quarterlies, but I don't like it at all. I don't like feeling like it sounds like we make a lot of money, but when you're putting 50% of it away or 40%, and then paying a lot in taxes, I mean, it doesn't feel like you're making a whole lot of money, and that's frustrating. But I mean, we never went into business. It wasn't about how much money we're going to make. So that's at the end of the day, I wouldn't, if that's your sole reason for, going into private practice, or on your own, I wouldn't recommend, I would think twice, but, it ends up working out. It's just, it's a new experience if you've never owned your own business before.
Something, you said a couple things that were pretty cool. The first thing you want to do, and you talked about a partnership and you talked about LLC, and then, I talked about a PLLC. The first thing you do want to do is get a business structure set up like that, because that protects you. And I think we all kind of glossed over it because we just did it and we were just like, yeah, just go ahead and start your business, but you do need to do that. It's pretty simple. For me, I think the Secretary of State is like 100. Yeah. And you just fill out a form and you have a PLLC, and now you can do all kinds of things and not be liable. No, I'm just joking. But that's your number one. Just get that thing taken care of. You're probably already going to have some malpractice insurance, but get your malpractice. These are the basic, get it done right away for your business structure. These are the things that way if somebody walks in your door the day you open, you are covered. So get your paperwork done with Secretary of State, get your malpractice insurance, get your bank accounts. Those are the three just right out of the chute. Get that done immediately. And then Idaho State Bar has the listing of the banks that they use for IOLTA trust accounts. And so just go straight to that website, you pick out a bank you like. I kept it different than my personal bank just to make sure there was no questions. So my business bank and my personal bank were two different banks. But those are the first three things you just need to go do. And I would do that. And then like the website, Facebook, all that stuff follows. You had said something else. Something that we didn't really touch upon earlier, but some of the reasons for going into business for yourself too, and this helps with your business structure, is, for me, I like being my own boss. I love trying cases. I love the way I like handling my cases, but I also love to talk to other people about it. It's a flexible schedule. Part of the reasons I went into doing it, and I think it's important for your business structure, is I wanted to be in different jurisdictions, meet different people, see different people. We have different cases and, misdemeanors and felonies and, sex cases and petty theft and lost dogs, but and knowing part of your business structure is what hours you're going to work, and you have to have boundaries on that as well. It's easy to be tempted to work all the time because you're not in it necessarily for the money, like you said, but it's also very easy to get wrapped up in, I need to make this money, I need to make this money. And so setting boundaries for yourself actually pays off a little bit, number one. And the other thing you said, not undercutting yourself. I think females tend to do that a little bit more too, where we maybe, okay, I'm not going to charge as much, or you need to have those boundaries in place and you need to kind of stick with them. And sometimes it's hard because you feel like you're going to lose business, but it's much healthier for you and it's healthier for your business. So I think that also helps drive your business structure and your model. So.
And that'll change. Initially when we started out, people would call with just general questions, and we would spend a lot of time, even if it involves research, we'll do it. And just the other day, we had kind of a similar question that would involve a lot of time. It was like, okay, well, I'm going to need a file. I'm going to open a file on this, and I'll need to bill you. And we're getting a little bit more because our time is much more limited. We don't have that free time anymore. So your boundaries might change a little bit. You might be willing to do more for free when you need the business, when you have the time to do that sort of thing.
I would just say make sure you set them up, and like you said, be able to adjust them, but make sure you set up boundaries for yourself, for sure.
Yeah.
So I think this is my last question, and then I think anyone else can jump in with questions that they formulated while listening to the discussion. But what has been the most challenging part of starting your own business and running your own business? And then what's been the most rewarding part of being your own boss? So that's the final question. What's the meaning of life?
Yeah. I think for me, the most surprising challenge has probably been taxes and HR issues. staffing issues. That's been very interesting because everybody has their own personalities, and just dealing with that. I mean, in our firm, we kind of had to delegate. Okay, I'm going to handle the building maintenance. I'll do this. Call the snow plow guy, and if the furnace goes out, I'll take care of it. One of my coworkers takes care of all the finances because I'm, like I said, a little bit stingy. I put everything in the bank and save everything, so I don't look at it. But it's important that someone looks at it every once in a while to make sure there's not random charges going out. So she's really good at that because she checks it probably a couple times a day, where I would never look at it. And then we have my other coworker is good with HR issues, and so she's kind of the one that people can go to if they have questions, need time off, or are unhappy with certain things. For me, because of my age, I've had some issues dealing with people when I'm telling someone who has been in the industry a lot longer than me, like, hey, I need you to format this, or I need you to do that. I mean, so that's for me in particular. I'm trying to think of what else. I mean, there's just initially it's somewhat overwhelming, but it works. You make it work. But I think all the little costs too. You need cards. There's just so many things.
The little stuff.
Yeah.
And I would say that what is most challenging about it and what is most rewarding about it is probably the same thing. Like Emma said, there's all these decisions that you need to make, and it's all on me. On the other hand, it's all on me. If I create a business card that I like the look of, great. If I don't, I don't. I start over. So to me, it's been really hard to wear all of those hats. I went to school to be an attorney. I didn't go to school to figure out whether my computer is going to work or not and who to call if it doesn't. I didn't go to school to create a website, so I don't know how to do that and whether I want to do that. I went out and had some guy create my website, and I think, I don't like this. I spent all this money for this website and I don't like it, but I didn't know enough about it to tell him what I didn't like about it and how to fix it. And that's frustrating for me. And I'm not a marketer. I didn't do advertising. I didn't do marketing. I didn't do any of that. And so, going back to my advice that I got way back in the beginning, if it's not your thing, hire it out, was a great idea. But in the beginning, I didn't necessarily have the money to hire it out. So you're trying to juggle all of those things to say, okay, how can I get a website that's acceptable and professional and I like without having that kind of expertise. So to me, that was really frustrating to have to wear those hats. It's comforting in a way to be able to go to somebody. And it's nice to have, like Emma does, you can walk down the hall and say, okay, you're the person that deals with the HR. I'm the person that deals with the furnace. And so when I did an office sharing, that was helpful because I could walk down the hall to another attorney and say, I don't know what I'm doing, help me out. And I would say if I have one bit of advice for anybody starting their own business, find mentors. Find people that you can call up at any time of the day or night and say, I need help. I need help in my line of business as a completely sole practitioner. I really felt the need to have that backup. I don't really know what to do with this case. I'm not entirely sure about this area of law. I want to take this case, but I want to be able to have that security that I'm not going to get sued for malpractice or drop something or, so find mentors for your business, find mentors for, people who have created their own practice, call me, call anybody, but find mentors. But that's the greatest reward of it too. You get to retain the people that you want. If I don't like somebody, because I can't pinpoint it. I don't really like the color of your shirt. I don't really like the tone of your voice. I can say no, thank you. I'm busy. I'm not taking new clients. Whereas a boss, I had to take those clients. I can also take the client that I know my boss at Legal Aid would have said, are you crazy? We're not taking that case. But it's my case to take and it's my case to win or lose. So to me, that's the biggest reward for it.
And I was just looking at your paper where it says find mentors. That was on my paper. The biggest thing you can do is find mentors, number one. The thing, there was sort of an outline coming in today, one of the questions about being surprisingly straightforward about opening a business. I just kind of wanted to add that into that is there's a lot of private practitioners that are so helpful. They will give you, they're generous with their time, even though it's valuable time. Respect it when you do see them, but generous with their time and generous with forms or generous with advice. Never underestimate that. And that's one thing I've really enjoyed about private practice is asking people for help. I've become somebody who can ask for help so much more, and it's made me a better attorney, 10 times better. So maybe that's my most rewarding thing is I've become a better attorney because of the challenges. And then the biggest challenge is for me, the first month I was open, like I said, I was initially going to take a pretty big caseload with me, and that just didn't work out. I was so lonely the first month. I was going crazy, and I went from seeing like 50 people a day to like 5, you know. And so what I spent a lot of time doing, instead of just being lonely and sad about the whole thing, I would go to lunch with people and learn. And I would spend time researching some stuff that I was curious about, you know, and get to know more people and network. And one of the really good things about private practice that I've enjoyed is I've got to get more involved in organizations and things like that I just didn't feel like I had time for before. And it's really been helpful to my development. So those are things I think private practice people think, oh my God, I'm gonna be working so hard, I'm not gonna be able to do all these things. It actually opens you up to more involvement in things. Your social and professional activities. So I would say keep that in mind, and that people are willing to help you. Just reach out, and in fact, they appreciate when you ask for help.
I would say my coworkers are amazing. I consider them my mentors, and they've been just so incredibly helpful. It's such a great support system to have them. I have this case right now that's just extremely contentious, and just they become personally involved. I mean, they're invested in me, and it's great to know that they care. I mean, they want to know what's going on. They'll review documents for me, and that's huge. I'm a perfectionist, so I think it would be really difficult for me to go out on my own because everything has to be perfect and I have to know the answers to everything. And having this business with 2 other people, we can do it together, and they can help me learn and grow. And that's just invaluable, the lessons I've learned from them as, you know, women owning their own businesses, just seeing how generous they've been. And I mean, we grow really close with the people who you start a business with. You're like a family. And it's the fun part of it is it's your business. You can wear what you want. We have a dog that my coworker brings her dog in every day. We have our funky furniture. We do our holiday cards are us and doing, you know, interesting things, and we think it's hilarious. And that's what's so fun is having your personality come through in all of that. And it's like your little stamp of this is who I am and this is what I do. And, you know, you're going to be successful personally, I think, from it.
Do we have any other questions?
You were saying registering with the Secretary of State. Does that cost? Is there a fee for that?
Yeah, I think it was 100, I want to say. I did Express because I was so excited. So it was like 120, which I didn't need to do, but I was like, I don't care.
I did the $100.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. We both don't like taxes, but I just was so excited to get it going. And then, so you just real easy. I think print it off the internet is what I did. Fill it out. I walked it in. It's down on like 4th Street. Walked it in, took it, and I had a conformed copy the next day. So
yeah, it's really straightforward. It's not complicated.
No, you don't have to like give blood.
No.
And that's a one-time versus
Yes.
ALPS, which is yearly.
And ALPS, I do automatic, but that's one thing too. With your malpractice insurance, and since I'm a small firm, automatic withdrawal on any of your insurance. So I do that. They set it up if you pay it all. You can pay it all at once, or you can do it in a monthly installment.
And one other thing on the setting up of the business, the other thing that we haven't really mentioned is you get an EIN number for your taxes also, since we're on the subject of taxes. And that's also very straightforward. You fill out an application, you send it in, and here comes this EIN number. So.
And so we started a PLLC originally. And then when we purchased our building, we decided someone told us the thing to do is you get another company, and that is the holding company for the property, and then you pay rent to that company, and then that, I mean, it starts, the more assets you have and the bigger you get, the more complicated you can make it. I mean, you can keep it really straightforward, but everyone's trying to save a little money here and there, and so you do this creative tax stuff, which is where we're starting to get. And like I said, we don't really understand it, but we're told that it works and it'll save us money. And once we got that first tax bill, I mean, we want to save money. And one thing that I don't think we've talked about, which I'm always interested in with solo practitioners, is getting people to pay their bills. For us, people pay, but it's not, I mean, it can take a while, and you're gonna have to make some phone calls. You can delegate and have your bookkeeper call, but at some point you might want to do it and call someone and say, hey, haven't paid this bill in a while, did great, thank you so much. And you try to be really nice about it. It can be awkward, especially when a lot of money is building up and building up and building up. And like, luckily, we've people pay, they don't pay, I think, within 30 days. That's not something that happens very often, I don't think, but they'll usually pay within 60. But when we noticed that people weren't paying within maybe 90 or more, after about a year, we said, maybe we should charge interest. We're not a bank, so maybe we can't afford, we need to get paid. When we have bills, we have to pay. So we started adding on, I think, it was a really, really low amount. And I don't even know if we charge it to people, but at least it's there and we can say that we, will if we need to. But that's one thing that's always interested me about solo practitioners is sometimes your clients might not pay. How do you deal with that?
Well, one thing that also is really important, and it kind of answers your question, listen to it. You spend a lot of time reading the professional rules of conduct. You do anyway as an attorney, but boy, more than ever, I'm like in the I don't know, IPRC or whatever, IRPC, whatever, the conduct rules. I'm in them all the time because you just want to make sure you're not going to do something to totally sabotage yourself. And for a lot of, criminal cases, it's a flat fee. So that helps because you certainly can get a retainer. And one of the things that is, I guess one of those things that's helpful is I can't work for you until you give me this retainer because I'm exposing myself to liability and so I need a retainer. And then part of it, there's written agreements that you enter into with your clients. And I know my agreements have that concept that there could be an interest charge in it. I don't do that at this point. In fact, I think I took it out at this point because I just was so focused on the flat rate. And then there's a certain part where you're gonna not ever collect on it. And you have to have a number in your head where you're like, okay, this is okay for me not to ever probably see. Until you get like just a major enforcer probably, So that's part of your business expenses too, is kind of knowing on the dollar how much you might not actually collect. But I thought there was a really interesting CLE recently about credit cards, using credit cards in private practice. I unfortunately did not have the opportunity to listen to it, but I think there's some interesting ethical issues with that. Now you have the Square reader. And that's really convenient and handy, but you want to be careful how you're handling your money, your funds that way. And then, like I said, other ways, just getting a retainer, and that's the biggest thing, especially in the criminal practice. So,
Julia.
I have a quick question. One of the biggest things our firm is dealing with, and we're a little bit bigger, 5, 6 attorneys, but is processing the paperwork, saving the emails to a file, getting the pleadings where they need to go, they come in the mail, get them into the computer. Do you guys have, we have people dedicated to do that, and it still doesn't get done all the time, unfortunately. How do you deal with that as, it would take me a good half an hour of my day to save all that for myself, and I just was wondering how you address that with your practices. Because it's a necessity, we all have to keep our files up.
right. I just don't ever delete everything. A lot of things are so electronic now, discovery wise and whatnot. So I just don't ever delete anything. And then typically I'm kind of, my assistant's very good about helping out with that. And then that's something I'm really fixated on, is printing out my emails and stuff like that. But yeah, it can get overburdening. So one of the backup ways I do that is just not get rid of anything. I try to get it into the electronic file right away. So I only have to open the email once. I only have to open the document once. If you're opening it and reading it, it's probably just quick to save it. But, sometimes it just doesn't happen. So that's my backup, is not to get rid of it ever. But yeah, it's a good question, for sure.
And I would say for me, because it is just me and I don't have an assistant, it's something that I spend a good deal of my day doing. And it just has to be done. And at that point, you have to make the decision, is it worth your time as an attorney to be handling those kind of administrative things? Or is it better to hire somebody that can do that for you and that you trust? And I'm kind of a control freak. So I like doing it myself because I know it got done. So there's, again, the benefit and the downside to it.
And I think the way you save and do things, it's always a work in progress. And so when we started out, we had the system that was in place at the other office we worked at, and there were ways we wanted to tweak it to make it a little bit better. And so we have a file room that has the hard files. We have offsite storage, and we have this runner she does our filing as well, and she's great. It's very, very organized. And so we know exactly when we go into the file room, if we ever need to look at the hard copy, we know where the depositions are, we know where the pleadings are, we know where the correspondence is. And then we have our e-file that's organized a certain way into different categories. And so the e-file is going to be much more extensive than the hard file. We don't print out like emails and put them in there. I think if someone emails us something, it'll go like a PDF, it'll go into the e-file. And then so for us, the backup storage is really important. And I think having a good tech person is really important as well, because that can just derail everything. If we have a day when like the internet's down or you can't get on to access certain things, I mean, what are you gonna do? Like there's really nothing to do. So for us, that was huge, is having a good system in place. And one thing that we, at the old firm we worked at, we would keep track of our time, just hand write our time. And when we started out, we started investigating different time programs that we could use. The one that we use is Clio. We found it works really, really well. It was kind of a new startup company. I mean, I think it's 5 years old, maybe more, but that's great because it's very flexible. So you can add people or take people off. I think it's monthly. So if you decide you don't want it, I think they offer storage, and they offer some document program where you can send confidential documents to people. We don't use that. But what we use it for is the calendar and just keeping track of our time. And it's great because you can, so like when a new file comes in, you enter in the new file information, you can start billing on it. You can go in and look and see what events or things are planned for that case, but you can also go in and generate these reports of how much time have I billed this month. And that's great for people who are kind of, obsessed with knowing that sort of thing. And so like my coworkers look at it in terms of money, and I always look at it in terms of hours, because that's really the only time frame like I have in my head, like, 100 hours. Okay, I know that's kind of a benchmark. But so that's important too, is figuring out the technology side. And actually I'm trying to think of, there's just, like I said, there's so much stuff to think of.
Actually, I had two questions. The first one is whether or not you guys hired a separate attorney to kind of outsource the limited liability agreement, or you getting somebody to draft your retainer agreements if maybe like contracts are not your strong suit. Like, is that something that you guys did? And then my other question was, how long did it take before you felt like you were on your feet, from start to, operational?
The only attorney we consulted was for the original partnership agreement, and then we realized it wasn't something we needed to have an attorney prepared, that we were attorneys and we could probably do it on our own. It was pretty straightforward, and we wanted to make things as simple as possible. But that was it as far as who we consulted.
I would agree with that. I didn't consult an outside attorney. I took Jean's approach and just talked to everybody under the sun that I could talk to, and they were all very generous with their copies of forms and retainer agreements. So that's kind of how I started up with them.
Yeah, that's basically it. I found an agreement from somebody that I really liked, and then just kind of tweaked it to how I liked it.
And we don't use retainer agreements, but we do get, when we have sometimes new clients, they'll send us a list of what their guidelines are. And sometimes they'll have their own, like these electronic billing guidelines that you have to use. And so the cost associated with that can take a lot of time initially to get your bookkeeper or tech person or whoever you were going to have set this thing up, where I think it's like linked to QuickBooks, or I don't know how it is, but somehow they get their invoices electronically, and then they can go in and they'll take all the time away that they want, which is what they do. And so I think initially starting out, you might get these agreements and not really give much pushback. But I think once you have the ability to maybe set your own terms, you might say, no, I think I do need to get paid for my travel. I live in Idaho and it's going to take me 4 hours to drive to so-and-so place, and I need to get paid for that. But some of the clients we deal with don't want to do that. And so initially you might just deal with it, but then eventually you might try to negotiate. So that's where we are. We're in that place where, we do look at those things more critically now that we have that option.
And I think going back to your question of how long does it take before you feel like you're on your feet, I personally still don't feel like I'm on my feet. There are still things that walk through the door today that I think, I don't know. I don't know. This is a new situation. I don't know how I'm going to deal with this or if I'm going to deal with it. But I think, as Emma says, the more experience you get, the more pushback you start getting on things. Like at the beginning, I think I probably just thought, okay, this is how it works, and I'm not going to get paid that much, or I should lower my fee, or I think you find that self-confidence the longer you do it, the more you realize, no, wait a minute, this is what my boundaries are, and you're more willing to stand up for them.
I'd also say, don't always let your pride drive you, because if there's something you don't know that much about, but you know somebody that could help this person better than you could, to me, that's really important that you're doing that person no justice by sending them to somebody that may be able to help them better in the time frame. So I think that's important as well.
Well, we are out of time for our hour-long chat. I know we have this room till 9:30 though, so if there's some questions and any of our panelists have a little extra time this morning, that's probably an option. And I want to make sure anybody who does have appointments can get to those. So thank you all very much. I really appreciate your time so much. Thank you.